My segment is called Creature with a Thousand Features, meaning movies. My sources were Roger Corman, Best of the Cheap Acts by Mark Thomas McGee, and Crab Monsters, Teenage Cavemen, and Candy Striped Nurses, Roger Corman, King of the B Movie by Chris Nashawati. Also the documentary Corman's World, which is perfect and it's so funny. It's important to start by clearing up that Roger Corman did not invent independent filmmaking, nor did he create B-movie pride. He was just the best at it. So little Roger Corman was born in Motor City, Detroit, Michigan, 1926.
It's 4 years after Judy Garland.
He's pretty
She was already on stage singing that then.
She already had a catalog of songs.
Jingle bells. Jingle bells again. Jingle bells redux.
He was born to William and Anne Corman. His childhood sounds like the childhood I'm convinced that I had, but I really didn't. He spent his childhood reading Edgar Allan Poe and building wooden model airplanes for him and his younger brother Gene, and they would sneak off to the movies and see classics of old Hollywood like Mutiny on the Bounty. He remembers that being specifically inspiring to him. The Great Depression didn't cripple his family. His dad had good work that survived the hardships, but things did get a little tight, and his sense of frugality made a lasting impression on both the Corman brothers. So William was an engineer back in Detroit, and that afforded him the opportunity to move his family to Beverly Hills, California in 1940 after he retired. This is when
just before World War II.
So Roger and Gene attended Beverly Hills High, and both of them started getting interested in the entertainment business. But it seems like Roger Corman's early life was about wanting to get into the movies and then making a move to avoid it.
Wait, what?
He was getting more interested in it, and then he would do something that completely derailed that interest.
Okay, so he's self-destructive.
Pretty much.
So I guess he does have a lot in common with Judy Garland.
He was in, okay, so what was Judy Garland doing in like 1940? Like already being in some movies?
She was, I mean, that was post Wizard of Oz.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay.
That was like that was before Meet Me in St. Louis. I think she was doing more Andy Hardy stuff. She was getting fake Oscars.
So around this time.
More on that later.
He was in school plays and seemed to really like being part of a production, but then after high school, he decided to follow in his dad's footsteps and study engineering at Stanford.
I see what you mean now.
Yeah. While at Stanford, Roger, again, joined the Navy as a member
I went to study drama at Stanford.
He joined the Navy as a member of the officers training program, and he hated it. He hated authority figures. He didn't like people commanding him around. He would do almost anything to get out of it.
Authority figures like Louis B. Mayer and the studio heads.
Pretty much.
Interesting.
As for Stanford, it seemed like that didn't really matter much to him either. Like he said, even as they were handing him the diploma, he knew that it felt wrong. He felt nothing for it. Corman was writing here and there and sold some articles, and that felt good to him. That felt right to him. His parents supported his decision to stray from engineering and go to show business. They were totally fine with it. This was in 1947, and Roger Corman was going to get into the legitimate Hollywood system.
So now he wanted in with the authority.
Exactly.
But there's nothing else.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You wanted into the business, you had to be swallowed by the machine. That's the only way. It's 1947.
It's Men in Black. You got to be swallowed by Edgar.
Is that in the one that I saw? His first entertainment job was at 20th Century Fox as a messenger in the mailroom, where he earned $32.50 a week delivering inter-office memos on
How
a
many
bicycle.
thousand is that in today's dollars?
That's about $3 million a week. He was delivering memos like Eddie Mannix to like Louis Bamer, like she ate another.
That was Fox.
Danish.
She wasn't at Fox though.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Well,
they had their own Eddie Mannix.
They had their own problem child.
Shirley Temple.
Yeah.
The enfant terrible.
Soon after he worked as a messenger, he got a job, your dream job, as being a story analyst and a reader, making $65 a week, which is double what he was making before. So it's only half as miserable. His job was basically summing up novels and spec scripts, a majority of them trash, and then he'd give them notes, and he would put aside any ones that can go into production. One of the first burns that Roger Corman suffered from the industry was when he took a liking to a story called The Big Gun, which was a Western. He found the story and he gave notes to make it better. Well, that movie went on to become The Gunslinger with Gregory Peck, and his notes for the story were used in the finished film, but Corman received no credit for them, as is the machine. And his boss got a big bonus for The Gunslinger. The film was even nominated.
Way to give notes.
The film was even nominated for a WGA award for Best Written American Western. And Corman thought, fine.
But it was an honorary award?
Yeah,
Certainly,
it was. They wrote
people
it,
only get honorary.
They wrote it on the Oscar. Corman thought, fine. It was my job to do this. I didn't need the bonus or even a slight increase in pay, but this whole machine runs on credits. I want the credit for that. Your credits are your Boy Scout badges when you're early in career, and I just needed the credit for fixing a story I like. That's how I'm going to move ahead, and you didn't give me the credit. We both know that's not how it works, but you could see that frustration clearly. I did work. The work was recognized. I got no recognition. So he left Fox to go to jolly old England on GI Bill to attend Oxford University for the purpose of studying literature so he could read scripts.
What?
Well, he also wanted to write too, but like when I read it, I'm like, did you go to Oxford to read scripts?
And here's my thesis on the works of Shakespeare. Now let me read The Beast of 100 Boobs.
Well, that goes well, I guess, because when he returns to sunny old Angel City, he gets a job at KLAC, and then after that landed a job as a literary agent at the Dick Irving Highland Agency. It's now 1954, and Corman is using his position at the Dick Irving Highland as an opportunity to push his own scripts to a company called Allied Artists, which had a small brick office building at the east end of Sunset near Hoover.
So that's how you do it. Infiltrate from the inside, like Men in Black.
Like the Nazis. I'm not going to let you kill that reference. It was
much like Will Smith in Men in Black when he killed Hitler.
I think I'm remembering that movie wrong. So it was a violation of the rules of the agency he worked for, trying to sell his own scripts, a fireable offense, but he didn't care because that was the end goal was, I don't care about this job.
Let's go to another job.
No, just do this in another place. The first screenplay he wrote that he was peddling was The House in the Sea, which was inspired by a trip he took to the Salton Sea. It was about a Korean war vet who was wrongly accused of killing a woman, so like any B-grade noir film. Around the same time, Roger's brother Gene manages to become an agent after reading in someone's memoirs that they made a lot of connections while playing tennis, specifically at the Beverly Hills Tennis Club. And Gene thought, well, I like tennis and I like connections.
What a sweet view of the world these people had, and it worked.
This is such old Hollywood stories. Like, I was eating milkshakes at Schwab's Pharmacy, and this guy said, do you want a 5-picture deal?
Jack Pierce came in and said, I'm looking for a new Frankenstein.
His connections would be needed soon because Roger was parlaying his own connections to push his screenplay. And like I said, he took his screenplay to Allied Artists and managed to sell it for $4,500, and he would get multiple credits for this. He got co-writer, an associate producer. Why did I say like a long list? He got co-writer and associate producer
and that's it.
And a guy who finished his sentence as well. Allied Artists took the script and pretty much butchered it. They rewrote large portions of it and ended with changing the name from House in the Sea to Highway Dragnet to cash in on the hit show Dragnet, which is just like a thing that happens now. Like maybe they'll confuse it and watch this by accident. This was another offense to Corman, but it happens. But yeah, he still is getting offended. Like, I worked on this thing and you don't like it? Why? But he walked away this time at least with money and credits and the confidence to try producing a movie on his own with the help from his brother. The two started Palo Alto Productions, which is funny that the guy who creates such memorable titles for movies couldn't come up with a better name for a production company, but that's fine. They had an office at 9170 Sunset Boulevard on the Strip, right above the historic Cock and Bull pub, which is the birthplace of the Moscow Mule.
Oh, yeah.
That year was 1954, and so frustrated from his two minor upsets with the film industry, Roger Corman began the first of what would be many of his types of movies with Monster from the Ocean Floor. Mm-hmm. Roger wrote it. He was out raising money to make it while Gene arranged the distribution with a man named Roger Lippert, who had once owned 60 movie theaters in California and Oregon, but now was making low-budget films for 20th Century Fox. Corman got the idea for the story from an article about a one-man submarine which had been manufactured by Aerojet. It's preposterous. So Monster from the Ocean Floor was about a one-eyed sea creature, and it looks like an octopus with a bulby head and one big glowing eye. It's super of that era. It
sounds like Men in Black. Roger Corman's Men in Black.
I'd watch that. Corman didn't write or direct this movie. He was producing it. It was written by Bill Donch and directed by White or Dung. Corman and his crew raised about $12,000 for it and also managed to get the actual one-man submarine from Aerojet for the movie in exchange for free publicity for the machine.
I feel like they didn't quite understand what movie it was being used for.
It's funny that
this thing can kill a monster.
The one-man submarine, it got a screen credit too. Submarine built by Aerojet General.
Submarine played by Underwater Boat.
The movie was shot in 6 days with some scenes shot at the Leo Carrillo State Beach along PCH.
Hey,
it's pretty cool.
That's where I got engaged.
Was it?
Yeah.
Are you the monster from the ocean floor? Yeah. You're that guy.
I put a ring on that tentacle thing. Her name's Melissa.
It was made for $12,000 and sold to Roger Lippert for $110,000. But when he found out that it was made for far less than Gene Corman had led him to believe, he shaved $10,000 off the deal. Still a pretty good deal, though. It was profitable, but they could have had $10,000 more.
But like $20 million back then.
Yeah, exactly. This could have...
That's like 4 hours of work for Judy Garland.
Even if she doesn't perform, she shows up, she makes that.
She makes more money when she doesn't show up.
But Roger was still not satisfied. He saw how fast you could shoot it and how cheap you could do it for, and he was understanding that you could still make a bunch of movies in a year and rake in all the profits, then make the movies that you were dying to make.
Make profitable trash for cheap so that you can make a good movie.
Yeah, eventually. So that same year, 1954, Roger Corman produced another B-grade crime pick called The Fast and the Furious, which is only similar in title to the original one. They bought the rights. Yeah. A young Paul Walker. When they bought the rights to The Fast and Furious in the 2000s, they only bought the title.
Wait a minute, is that true?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. They bought the rights to the movie, but they only bought the rights to the title. This Fast and Furious involves a trucker framed for murder who breaks out of jail, takes a young woman hostage, and enters her sports car in a cross-border road race, hoping to get to Mexico before the police catch him.
That's not Fast and the Furious?
No, that's not the Fast and the Furious that we've come to
know and love.
Yeah, know and love. I've come to know and only know, really. I never watched it. So both Columbia and Republic Pictures offered to buy the movie off of Palo Alto, but Corman wanted to make the kind of money on the deal that would result in him being able to make several movies throughout throughout the year, all done at both a fast pace and a furious pace.
And a Tokyo Drift pace.
Now, through the director of Monster from the Ocean Floor, Wyatt Ordung, Roger came in contact with a guy named Jim Nicholson, who was the sales manager at something called Real Art. I don't know what they did, who was hoping to start his own distribution company. Nicholson heard that Corman was selling the Fast and Furious and wanted to buy it and use it to help close a deal with exhibitors across the country. Nicholson's plan was to sell the Fast and Furious on the condition that
I never knew that we would be so blatantly using the name Fast and Furious on this podcast.
Well, we're never going to talk about Vin Diesel's career.
How he's a perfect metaphor for the new Hollywood transition.
Nicholson's plan was to sell the Fast and Furious on the condition that the exhibitors advanced the money for 3 additional movies.
Okay. We're still not talking about the modern day Fast and the Furious.
It's 1954. Why would we talk about...
But there's making all these sequels.
Oh my God.
What was the names of the other ones? Is it Too Fast, Too Furious, Greg?
Oh no. Tokyo Drift, 6 Fast, 6 Furious.
Hobbs and Haw, Hobbs and Shaw, whatever.
Bed Knocks and Broomsticks. Oh no.
Fast and the Furious presents Bed Knocks and Broomsticks.
They wanted to sell this and show it to exhibitors, and they would get advanced for 3 additional movies. So Corman gave Nicholson 30 days to see if this would work. Corman and Nicholson flew across the country pitching to exhibitors. These two, Corman and Nicholson, along with a lawyer named Sam Arkoff, would make up this team that would make most of the Corman career. Sam Arkoff was a lawyer, and Jim Nicholson would form American International Pictures, AIP, which I'll call for the rest of this thing, and Corman would be their biggest supplier. Corman was sort of like the third musketeer. Like, he was heavily involved. He's not part of AIP, but AIP pretty much bought anything that Corman made. So he was like the third man in this team. For a long time, he was their only supplier. The deal was that he would make like 10 movies a year, and upon delivery for each movie, he'd get $50,000 negative pickup, whatever that means, plus
You don't watch Shark Tank?
$15,000 advance on foreign sales. So they're making movies together, AIP and Corman. Mid-50s, this was a time when television walloped the theaters for the attention of the American audiences, and movies went into
Judy Garland show,
and movies went into full panic mode, along with the
The Sopranos come out or something?
Yeah, I had to watch every episode. I had to watch The Wire.
There were 4 channels: CBS, NBC, ABC, HBO.
Kind of controversial at time, but Leave It to Beaver. I've seen all the episodes already. Sopranos. What's this family about?
What happens when this kid misbehaves? Oh no.
Oh jeez. Why is he digging a hole and crying? So television came, started kicking movie theaters in the ass. That, alongside the antitrust laws that prevented film studios from owning movie theaters, squeezing out low-budget independent-made movies. So now low-budget movies from these rinky-dink studios, they had a chance to be seen, and American audiences were becoming more accustomed to relatable stories instead of grand epics done by these studios. Also, 1954 was the year the horror movie Them and Godzilla came out, setting out the nuclear monster movies of the 50s. So they were really good ones that came out, and then just all the bad ones followed. And guess who was responsible for all the bad ones? You also had like really popular Western TV shows coming on at the time. Bonanza for young kids and teenagers. Gunsmoke.
The Rifleman.
You know a lot.
Zorro. The ultimate Western gunslinger.
So the first movie he made for AIP was in 1955. It was a Western called 5 Guns West, and Corman would be directing it, and he hadn't really directed anything to this point with like actual stakes, like money behind it, and had to be seen by a lot of people. It was said that he had his eyes glued to the script while scenes were being filmed, until eventually the writer told Corman to concentrate on the actors being filmed. Roger has said that...
You're saying the line.
I just want to make sure that they get every punctuation mark.
You didn't say period.
I went to Oxford. Roger has said that making the first movie was so nerve-wracking. You'll love this. He was sick to his stomach the whole time.
My kind of guy.
It rained the first day, and he was on his way to the set when it started to come down, and he pulled over and threw up on the side of the road.
That's the perfect time to do it, because everyone thinks it's just more rain.
Okay, so low-budget filmmaking is interesting in a lot of different ways, but my favorite is how people get into them. Like the director of Monster from the Ocean Floor recruited a gas station attendant in Hollywood and possible actor, I don't know, Jonathan Hayes for a role. He then went on to play a role in The Fast and the Furious. Hayes then got his friend Billy Campbell to write a script for Corman in exchange for writing a big role for Hayes. Hayes, who was an actor, through his roles in Corman movies, became a valuable asset to the productions and eventually became the stunt coordinator for all of the Corman picks while continuing to act in the movies. So it's friends helping friends and gaining a wide array of experience, because on these low-budget movies, you do a bunch of stuff you weren't necessarily hired for, and you get all these experiences, and then you bring your friends in, and then you bring
college credit.
And you also get college credit, and you don't have to worry about that come
re-enrollment time at Oxford to be a production assistant.
Imagine him having to go back to Oxford in between movies. So after 5 Guns West comes Apache Woman in 1956, probably because he wanted to reuse the sets and props and actors, and the cameras were out. Like, that's exactly how he worked. Like, I have everything out now, might as well shoot 3 Westerns while we have the guns before we get to take it back to the rental thing. Like, it's so ludicrous. Like, that Dick Miller guy, Dick Miller, the actor, he played 2 roles on Apache Woman as both a cowboy and a Native American, and if I remember correctly from the documentary, he shoots himself in the movie.
All along, I was the cowboy and the Indian.
Wasn't that a metaphor that we were all looking for? So around...
Hey.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Around this time...
Well done, Roger Corman.
Pretty smart guy. Did you go to Oxford? Around this time, it's becoming very evident that unless Corman could figure a way to make the third movie for half the price, the difference left over would come out of his pocket. Because the deal was that he had to make these 3 movies for them, and then they would start paying off, and he can get into this cycle of being paid for each movie. So while filming Apache Woman, Corman sends Lou Place, an actor and a production manager, to go out to make a non-union film in Indio, and he gave him $28,000 to do this. It was based on a sci-fi script from Tom Flyer, and eventually became The Beast with a Million Eyes. So boom, they make it and hand it over to AIP, and they sell it. But there's a snag when the exhibitors see the movie and they realize that there isn't a visible monster. It was sort of like an alien watching over everything with no visible, like no actual manifest monster.
With a million eyes, though.
With a million eyes. So now they're refusing to buy it. So he comes back to Corman, and now, he's got to throw this gash down monster in this thing. So Corman contacts none other than Monster Boy himself, Uncle Forey, Forrest J. Ackerman, Monster King, proprietor.
Give me one of your spare monsters.
Yeah,
quick.
You got any monsters lying around? Proprietor and ghoul daddy of famous Monsters of Filmland. So Forey put Corman in contact with a special effects guy named Paul Blasdale.
Paul Blart special offense part.
Paul Blaisdell, who quickly put together a little hand puppet and a miniature spaceship for $200 and saved the movie. Not really. No one really liked it. And Lou Place had...
Thanks for saving us.
Yeah. Lou Place had taken his name off of the movie, but contractually it fulfilled Corman's 3-picture deal, which was the Fast and the Furious.
Technically, it's a movie.
Yeah, technically it runs on frames. There's 24 frames per second. After he has the 3-movie deal done, let's go make another picture. He had made a deal with 2 drive-in theater owners in New Orleans to make a pick for them, and he was off to Louisiana to film Swamp Women. He set it up real nice down there for his cast and crews. They stayed at an abandoned hotel with running water and little house. One actress's bed collapsed in the middle of the night.
Did they have strings hanging from the ceiling that swayed around with no one around to touch it?
Oh, they do! After Swamp Women came the day that the world ended in 1956. It was with this movie that...
I remember that date. I remember the day the world ended.
Was that April 6th? It was with this movie that AIP and Corman were going to see if they can get a percentage off the box office sales from exhibitors, because so far their movies were always the B-side to a double feature, hence B movie, not the letter, not the insect. I wrote that in my notes because I don't let them say it. So as B movies on double bills, they were only entitled to a flat rental rate for movies, which was usually a couple $100. $300 was decent for them. AIP and Corman wanted a percentage of the box office, and so AIP went and stuck 2 movies together, The Day the World Ended and Defend Them from 10,000 Leagues, which is we know what you're ripping off, together, and sold them as a package for the same money.
Under the ocean.
He put these 2 movies together and sold them as a package for the same money that the exhibitors were giving to major studios for a single crap movie. Now you get 2 crap movies for the price of 1. So the exhibitors saw the scheme and tried to split up the movies, and AIP held firm on their decision/scheme. It paid off in the first week of December in Detroit. Detroit decided to go with this deal. So when that deal went through, there was a blizzard in Detroit and also a newspaper strike.
Can't throw up on that. So that's too visible.
That'll hang. That'll freeze. And in 6 weeks...
That's going to be there till spring. Yeah. And people will make fun of you in spring, trust me.
So there's a newspaper strike that threatens the movies coming out, as does this blizzard. So Nicholson and Arkoff, they fly to Detroit, and they went around the streets in a monster caravan with people dressed up as monsters trying to convince people to go to the movies, and by golly, it worked.
Go to the movies!
I'm gonna eat your daughter in a stroller if you don't go see Phantom from 10,000 Seas or whatever. Monster caravan is just 2 words I love saying. Roger and Jean back home were also making friends and networking, which people in Hollywood think is the same thing, focusing on drive-in theaters and children's burn, solid burn. I would love it if the machine ate me. At least you get paid.
I would love to be sucked into the gears and have to take pills.
They're back home, they're making connections, and they're focusing on drive-in theaters and children's matinees because they know their audience. They've become close with the owner of the Pacific Drive-In Theater chain, a man named Bert Pirosh. A pretty powerful guy as far as exhibitors go, because LA had a huge chain of Pacific drive-ins, and if you weren't playing his drive-ins, then you weren't playing your movie in LA, and that was like a big market in getting people to watch movies in LA. And you wouldn't play drive-ins if you weren't making these type of B movies that they were making. Those were the only things, because audiences were there for them, and as long as you play to that audience,
they're just there to have backroom music while they mac.
No, those passion pits while they're necking over there. As long as you played to these audiences and followed the cultural trends that they were into, you were going to make money. That's what Roger Corman did his entire career. He saw a cultural change coming and he followed it. So they're about 7 movies deep into this thing, and usually with the same people who are
the beast that's 7 movies deep.
The creature with 1,000 features. Around 7 movies.
Get it now.
That's funny. But 7 movies in, that's when he starts forming the Corman crew. The first couple features, he saw that not everyone was particularly good at their jobs. So next feature, he'd bring back the ones who were good at jobs, drop the ones that were bad, and repeat the process for each movie. And each movie, he'd bring the good people that worked for him before were getting better. New ones would come on board. The new bad ones would be dropped. The new good ones would be kept for the next picture, and they would get better.
You get a pure muscle film crew.
Exactly. Is that a thing?
It's a thing on my arm, so I'm assuming it can be on film crews as well.
His production team, they started getting hired by other crews because they were so good. Not necessarily because they liked working for Corman. I don't know why. Floyd Crosby, who did camera work for Monster on the Ocean Floor, that was his number one cinematographer. He would eventually be the cinematographer for High Noon, which was certainly not a Corman pick, and won an Academy Award. He won an Academy Award for Taboo.
Wait, you can win Academy Awards?
You don't just be guilt given
or denied them by Grace Kelly.
Grace Kelly was in High Noon, by the way.
And the Oscar goes to the Beast from 1,000 Feet.
Floyd Crosby.
I'd like to
thank God who did not make me.
Thank God who I've destroyed.
Who I'm an affront to.
You fear me. You really fear me.
So Floyd Crosby worked on High Noon after working for years on Corman movies. He won an Academy Award for Taboo, A Story in the South Seas. He's also father to David Crosby.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh, that's too bad.
What a shame. David Haller was an art director, and Ronald Sinclair was his editor. Marjorie Corso was his costume manager. Dick Rubin and Carl Brainerd were his prop manager. Jack Herrera was his assistant director, and Jonathan Hayes was his stunt coordinator and one of his biggest actors. His chief composer, I was going to tell you this one when I went in and out earlier, was Ronald Stein. He took a chance on Stein, not paying him much, obviously, but giving him the chance to work. He composed 12 movies in like 2 years, 1956 to like 1958. And in case you missed that, yep, Roger Corman made 12 movies in 1 year. Anyways, Stein was said to be the finest composer working in low-budget movies.
Feinstein.
He's Feinstein. He was the finest composer working in these trashy movies. I was reading about him, and I knew that I knew his name from somewhere. And then I remember that Ronald Stein made the music for one of my favorite movies ever, a little Jack Hill movie called Spider Baby, which is fantastic. The music is fantastic throughout the whole movie, with a theme song is absolutely perfect. Lon Chaney,
Spider Baby.
Lon Chaney Jr. sings it, and it's, if you're near your computer, please listen to the theme from Spider Baby because it's so good. You can hear how old Lon Chaney Jr.
Judy
is.
Garland's version of it.
It sounds a lot like Somewhere Over the Rainbow.
Spider. Which, by the way, speaking of spiders and Judy Garland, the song Starman on the Ziggy Stardust and Spiders from Mars is musically the same song as Over the Rainbow.
Really?
Starman. Na.
He ripped her off.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Everyone.
Good for him. So Ronald Stein got his start with Roger Corman. Charles Bronson got an early leading role in Machine Gun Kelly. Robert Towne, who wrote screenplay to Chinatown, got his start writing The Last Woman on Earth for Corman. All he got from Corman was the title, and Towne had to go from there. This is the first of like maybe 2 or 3 where I just list all of the people who worked for Corman through the years. Monty Hellman, who later directed Two Lane Blacktop and Cockfighter, both starring the incredible Warren Oates, got to start directing The Beast from the Haunted Cave when he had very little experience. Even at this early stage of Corman's career, he was helping to create superb movies in the future, and nobody knew it yet.
I mean, even at this point, he's kind of training the people who made a mini revolution inside the studio system. Basically, with like two-lane blacktop
and everything.
Blap.
Yeah, I've already said it already. He's like training the people who would make great movies in the 70s. And like the leading force obviously is Easy Rider, but there's a bunch of movies around Easy Rider that like followed through the 70s that would just follow the same things, and they really hammered home this new style of making
They
movies.
are the children of Corman,
or as it's
which
called.
Is another horror movie of his, The Man with 1,000 Proteges.
A sentiment shared amongst many people with Roger Corman was, yes, he didn't pay very well, but he gave you an opportunity that no one else was willing to give you, and you gained the experience and the credits you needed to go find work that would pay you well. Corman knew full well how important these two things were to any person on the low end of the entertainment business. Getting experience and credit were two very important things. Yes, I was that gaffer on The Creature with Knife Hands that ate babies, and I'd like a job early.
And I'm not going to take it anymore.
Now, of all of the success stories to come from Roger Corman's movies, none is bigger than his next one, and it happens to be very early on in both their careers. So Corman decides that he wants to sit in on acting classes to start meeting fresh talent, people who had the desire to work hard and were willing to accept very little pay in exchange for credit. It's at Jeff Corey's acting class where he meets a young man who stands out, and his name is Jack Nicholson.
Wow.
And he was so impressed by Nicholson's willingness to work for very little money that he cast him in Crybaby Killer, where he would play the Crybaby Killer. Spoiler. By the way, there is a great, I've said it already, there's a great documentary about Roger Corman called Corman's World, and Jack Nicholson is the star of it. He's so funny, and he cries at the end.
Spoiler again. Yeah. He never left that role.
Crybaby Killer, the writer Leo Gordon, who acted in the movie, gave himself the best line of the movie. Teenagers. We never had them when I was a kid. The AIP guys, Arkoff and Nicholson and Corman, they really did stumble onto something unseen in the film industry before. They were successful playing to the cheap seats of the drive-in and the bad theaters that showed double features. Their B movies were in demand, and AIP became the biggest of the independent distributors in Hollywood, and Corman was their main guy.
It's so the opposite of what Judy Garland was doing.
It
to
really
think
is.
of Crybaby Killer and then look at Broadway Melody.
Exactly. As you were talking, I was thinking, happening underneath all of this, a bunch of
Literally
guys.
the B-side.
Yeah, the B-side of this. A bunch of guys were in the desert with like 20 grand and like a monster outfit. We're like, I know it's bad, just keep doing it. Maybe it'll be something one day. Who knows? Just keep doing it.
But Judy Garland's going to be at the Orpheum.
Corman was very practical when it came to his movies. He wanted them done fast and cheap with an eye always on the bottom line. By the end of the 50s, Corman directed 24 movies and was already making plenty of money for AIP, but not enough for himself. So he decides, all right, I want to go into the distribution game. He put Palo Alto aside and created a company called Film Group. Now, on a bet, I don't know with who or what the bet necessarily was. I think the bet was like, could you just do it? But on a bet, he bet that he could make a movie in 2 days with a budget of $20,000. That movie is Little Shop of Horrors, and it stands out.
Whoa.
Yeah. It's like
The Jack Nicholson one.
Yeah.
Wow.
2 days. They talk about this movie like it's Beatles Revolver. Like that's when people are like, oh, there's something here. Like this movie's funny and weird. His camera
the sitar playing on, I'm a dentist.
His camera angles were getting more ambitious. His scripts were getting funnier. It's a funny movie.
Yeah.
It came out because his friend had the set already built for something else, and it was just sitting there. And Corman thought, I can knock out a movie real quick. And that was pretty much the bet. And the guy's like, I bet you can't do it. He's like, I have 2 days before the set comes down. I'm going to do this. Around this time, he creates one of my favorite movies from his catalog. Maybe of all the movies that I've watched, one of my favorite movies, Bucket of Blood. Have you seen Bucket of Blood?
No, but I know you love that movie.
I love Bucket of Blood. Written by Charles Griffith and directed by Corman. It's the story of a talent. Do you know the story?
No.
So there's a waiter at a beatnik bar, and he has no talent, and he's really awkward, and he wants to be a beatnik artist, and he winds up first murdering a cat by accident because the cat is in the wall, and he's trying to find out where it's at with a knife because he's not smart, and he kills the cat, and then he covers it in clay and puts it in this gallery, and people are like, this is great.
First rule of screenwriting, kill the cat.
Kill the cat. All the hipster artists like, this is jazz, baby. And then he's like, well, I gotta keep doing it. So he just keeps killing people and covering them in clay and taking them to the art gallery. It's fun. Dick Miller's in it. Dick Miller is so good in this. Some people say that this is a self-reflective piece about Corman. The movie is about Corman's need or want to assimilate into greats of filmmaking, but using cheap death pose as art to do it, which is pretty clever.
Did he have anything to do with Head, the Monkees
Somebody
movie?
did. No, he didn't, but it was being done around this.
Because Jack Nicholson wrote that, and Jack Nicholson was learning and working from Corman.
The guys who paid for Easy Rider were the guys who worked on Head.
Okay.
We'll get to that fiasco. Roger Corman's personal style was bleeding through to his films despite his lack of finances, which is what happens when you learn to work cheap and effectively, is that you can execute ideas with ease and with confidence without the money being there. Can't get a crane shot of the side of a building? Throw the camera off the roof and hope it doesn't break. That's DIY filmmaking, baby. That's lesson number one. Now,
it's going to be a twirly shot.
that's what the guy falling off the roof will think.
You don't want to be irresponsible. You have to also throw the cameraman with the camera. Thus comes the old saying, throw the cameraman out with the camera.
Now that he has a distribution company, he can hawk his own movies, but also he needs other movies to buy and sell at theaters. So he gets into the executive producer game. I think one of the first movies that they bought was Stakeout on Dope Street, and it was directed by a newcomer named Irving Kershner, who would a couple decades later make the best Star Wars movie, The Empire Strikes Back.
Phantom Man. Oh, yeah.
Right. After Stakeout on Dope Street came The Brain Eaters, done as a favor to one of the frequent actors, Ed Nelson.
Directed by Francis Ford Coppola.
Corman gave Nixon 6 days with Brain Eaters and $26,000 to shoot it. It got made, didn't make much of a splash, and was later sued by Robert Heinlein for ripping it off from a serial series called The Puppet Master. Corman loved and respected Heinlein and gave him $5,000 in a settlement since the movie was very low budget.
This is 90% of what we made.
But Corman saw that things couldn't function the way they did with AIP. Crappy B movies and monsters and bikini girls were fine, but within 10 years...
They're fine. They sure are fine. Monsters.
But within 10 years, the culture was changing again. It's the dawn of the 60s, so he wanted to stay ahead of the curve.
Aquarius.
Yeah, I don't know what that means.
It's a musical.
Is that
you want to hear? Here, I can transition nicely into singing. The age of Aquarius.
You're breaking my computer.
I'm breaking your computer's heart because that was such a beautiful...
numbers.
It's just zeros falling out, which are computer tears.
He wants to stay ahead of the curve. Like we mentioned, he knew what to do. He knew that I have to follow these kids around and see what's going to come next, make movies for them that they don't even know they want yet. I have to incept them. What him and AIP had made up to that point was like, it's defined basically as 10-day black and white B movies. That served their function, but Corman was getting bored of it now that his confidence and his skills as a director and a producer were matching his ambitions. What Corman wanted now at the dawn of the 60s was to do a 15-day horror movie in color. What he wanted to do was a film adaptation of Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher. He, as a kid, read all of the complete works of Usher and he loved them. But
Complete works of Usher?
Sorry, the complete works of Poe, you're right.
He loved R&B. The way he could dance.
But AIP had one concern. There's no Gerstern monster in The Fall of House of Usher. So Corman thinks quick and is like,
well, who made the house fall down?
So his reply is, the house is the monster. And they're like, all right, fair. They're like,
And it has tentacles.
So Corman brought in Twilight Zone.
It does have wings, though.
Okay.
Houses have wings, the east wing, the west wing.
Oh. I'm poor. I have a cellar.
Well, where did you sup, if not in the north wing?
Corman brought in for Fall House Usher, Twilight Zone writer, and all-around horror legend. Do you want to pick which one?
Richard Matheson.
Richard Matheson to write Fall House Usher, and to star it was none other than Vincent Price, who is perfect in every way. Fall of House of Usher, huge success for AIP. Apparently ran on a double bill with Psycho that summer. That's how pretty big it was.
That's a fun double feature.
Yeah, I would love that. Of course, AIP wanted more of these Corman Poe picks. It seemed like throughout the 60s, one or two would be being every year. After House of Usher, there was Pit and the Pendulum, Premature.
Yeah, so he was behind all of these Vincent Price Poe movies.
They're all Corman movies. He didn't direct all of them. He directed a large portion of them, but yeah, he's behind all of them. Premature Burial, which was adapted by another Twilight Zone writer and a person who lived the Twilight Zone, Charles Beaumont. Tales of Terror, The Raven with Peter Lorre playing the Raven. It's really funny.
I'm the Raven.
The Haunted Palace, the beautiful Mask of the Red Death. Have you seen that?
I haven't.
It's very good. Okay, it's good. It's beautiful.
It's Roger Corman good.
It's Roger Corman good. And Tomb of Lygia. There were 8.
I've seen that.
Is that good? I've never seen that one.
I don't remember, but I know. No, it's not that good.
Corman
I
good.
remember now. It's not that good.
It's Corman good.
It's Corman bad.
So there were 8.
Corman bad.
There were 8 Corman Poe picks in total, and they always seem to have a huge audience. But let's go back. Okay, so that's throughout the 60s he's making these. Let's go back to 1960 after he makes, I think, like Pit and the Pendulum, the second one. It's a success, and he dared himself to do something artistic that he cared about. Finally, the moment that's all been building. He wants to do something. I'm not quite sure whether he was at a point in his career where he thought, or it was actual where people would watch something solely based on his name being attached to it. If he could sell his name.
Roger Corman presents.
Exactly. If like, I want to see it because Roger Corman's name. I don't know if he's there yet, but I think he thought he was. So for his next move after Usher was an even bigger dare, and he was gambling a lot of his self-confidence on the success of this thing. So Roger Corman set out to direct his passion project, a movie that he would...
A Star is Born.
A Star is Born. Have you heard of it? A movie that he would hope mark him as an artist with integrity. The movie was adapted from a Charles Beaumont novel titled The Intruder. The Intruder tells the story of a white supremacist and segregationist who goes to a small southern town that is on the brink of integrating and starts causing trouble and almost leads to a lynching until the townspeople come to their senses. It's no monsters, not exploitation at all.
Sounds like a monster.
Worse than a monster. It's something
Man
like
is the worst monster of all. So
if we learn anything from anything Richard Matheson wrote, we're pretty bad. It's an anti-racist movie, but told from the perspective of a racist. It's a very daring movie of its time. The novel was controversial, especially, like I said, 1960, but no doubt the movie would be too. But this was not an exploitation movie. Roger Corman fervently believed in integration, and even though he was a Republican, he's one of those human Republicans where he believes in civil rights, and he wanted to show how charming an evil person could be. The charmer in question would be played by young William Shatner, another Twilight Zone alumni who had not yet done Star Trek. They raised some money with AIP and Pathé Studios, but neither covered the entire cost, so Jane and Roger had to pay out of pocket to help level off the film's budget. For The Intruder, no sets were built, so what did they do?
Go to the South.
They went to South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, to film a movie about integration and racism in the early 60s. And the town was a little hesitant off the bat to help white filmmakers from the North, but there was this pastor came and he helped them settle in until the townspeople ordered a copy of Beaumont's novel that the movie was based on. And when they found out what it was going to be about, they kindly asked the film crew to go away. After that, they filmed in a couple different locations in Missouri with local cops, and apparently
welcoming. Come on.
And apparently the FBI keeping a close eye on the production. I don't know if that's true or not. Apparently there were scenes of the movie filmed in a fever pitch while Gene distracted 2 cops with whatever AIP did for craft services.
What?
Yeah.
Like, here's a bunch of Snickers bars.
Yeah.
Don't look over there.
Have you ever seen a table full of pineapples? Like, not up close. And Roger's just like, go say all this bad stuff real quick.
Put on the hood. Put on the hood.
So the movie was made on the run, basically. But getting it made was only half the problem because, okay, they get it made. It's tough, but they get it made. Now they have to find a theater to show it in. Again, 1960 America. At a preview showing of the movie where it's a test audience, the audience was mostly white and the reviews were not great. A lot of the audience members were ripping up reviews and saying things like trash Hollywood communists. Those people people are the parents or grandparents to awful people in 2019 who don't want social issues mixed in with entertainment, so they're not good people. But Bert Pierosh, who owned the Pacific Drive-Ins, he said, I will not be playing this movie in the drive-in. I don't know.
Death Kiss.
Death Kiss, yeah. The MPAA...
Which is his next movie.
I got an idea. I imagine he would like someone to say something like Death Kiss, and he'd just turn to somebody and he's like, write that. Right. You got 2 days, write that.
We're shooting at dinner.
So the MPAA also would not give their seal of approval for the movie because it used the N-word in the movie. This shortly after the MPAA...
That's strangely progressive of them.
It is, but this is a movie where it's used to showcase how bad it is. Like there was, I think...
So if it was used for fun...
Exactly.
Then
that's a
like,
bad example.
Show it. Come on.
That's what Corman said. Like there was 5 other examples in the 40s and 50s where that word was used, and you made those movies, and now I'm trying to show how racism is bad, and that word is said by a racist in a movie, and you're saying no to that. Yeah, it's progressive. Yeah, that word doesn't need to be said, but I'm trying to convey a character. The MPAA president Eric Johnson declared that it was time to exercise, he said this in a quote, it was time to exercise more courage and more conviction in motion pictures. This really pissed off Corman because he had made dozens, almost 60 trashy exploitation movies, all of them for profit. After a certain point, he got all the credits he needed. He was making movies to make money. He knew this. Now he wanted to make this passion project that dealt with, this came from a point of courage and conviction, and they were not helping him, and it really burned him. No one seemed to be helping him. Roger was informed that it wouldn't be showing at Cannes, which really sucks, but the ultimate blow to both Corman and The Intruder was that Pathé Studios dropped out of their distribution deal with Corman. They helped fund it with the promise that Corman would deliver another Poe picture, and that's what Premature Burial was. That was going to be for Pathé, but AIP got wind of it and they muscled Pathé out of that deal because they wanted sole property of these Corman Poe pictures. So Pathé backs out of the deal. They pretty much gift Premature Burial to AIP, and that leaves The Intruder in limbo. AIP does not want that. Nobody wants that. It's seen by some audiences. It receives pretty good reviews overall, although not a masterpiece. It's certainly way ahead of its time and better than anything else he was doing. But more importantly, he cared about it. This whole ordeal really, really bothered him, and he kind of never got over it. He said that was the only movie that he lost money on, and the lesson he learned was that he should just keep his opinions to himself. It was a damn it's hearing him talk about it now. He's so much like everything you've heard me say. If you never heard him talk before, he's Mr. Rogers. He's so mild-mannered and polite. He's like a genuinely nice guy. So when he talks about the pain of The Intruder, it really hurts my feelings because it seems like I believe in integration and I want to make this movie, and it sucks. It really bums me out. Yeah. So I've been talking a long time.
Never go out on a limb. That's the story of this. Never try to make a movie in the South.
Let's try to race through the 60s, as anybody living in the 60s was trying to do. So,
you didn't race through it. You weren't really there, man.
Along with all the Poe pictures he's directing, he's helping produce a bunch of movies and giving work to fresh young talent who will work for peanuts. So much happens in this era, and it's almost impossible to sum it up succinctly since I spent all this time getting us here. Roger continues to stay ahead of the curve in terms of youth culture. He reads articles about the Hells Angels terrorizing a town, so he makes a biker movie starring the son of Henry Fodder, Peter, the Wild Angels. It's a huge drive-in exploitation success and launches the biker movie trend, which was a huge trend of the 70s. It's said that the 2 of the actors in the movie...
Sounds like a certain movie coming out in 1969.
Weird. Starring the same person. Weird. This is another rumor. I don't know if it's true, but I read it and I thought you'd like to know. It's said that the 2 of the actors in the movie, Bruce Dern and Diane Ladd, had sex and conceived a child during the production of this movie. That child is Laura Dern. Rumor. I mean, that's her parents. That's not the rumor.
Yeah.
Whether she was conceived during the Wild Angels.
I think they might be dating.
Anyways, not only is Wild Angels popular, but it made bank for AIP and Corman. The following year, they saw that acid was becoming a big factor in the hippie counterculture movie. So Corman's like, yeah, let's make a movie about acid. So he brought back Peter Fonda, got Jack Nicholson to write it since he had experience dropping acid. He added in Dennis Hopper, who had starred in a pretty good LA horror movie called Night Tide that AIP distributed, not to mention friggin' Rebel Without a Cause. And the 3 of them, or 4 of them, they made a movie called The Trip about a TV commercial director who tries acid for the first time.
So, I mean, this is like the test run of Easy Rider, pretty much.
Yeah, basically. You could see it all coming to this.
Yeah.
The movie is incredibly artistic and kind of terrifying. So to direct this movie, Corman wanted to illustrate an acid trip as perfectly as he could, and he wanted to translate it. He wanted it to translate well.
So he gave the camera acid.
So the guy who went to Oxford to learn how to write monster pics, that same guy was like, well, all right, I'm making a movie about acid. I should probably drop a responsible amount of acid for research purposes.
An Oxford man's amount of acid.
And the cast of dirtbags like Nicholson and Fonda and Hopper were like, they wanted a square-ass guy who's way older than them. Like, yeah, you should probably drop acid.
You should pay for it.
Do you think we could borrow money to buy acid? So this whole caravan of actors, they start heading up to Big Sur to do drugs because Roger Corman's like, I hear you have to be in nature to do drugs. They drive to Big Sur. I don't know if they're filming scenes or they just go up there to do drugs, but Corman, in typical Corman fashion, builds a schedule for taking acid. acid. So there's a list of when someone is going to drop
This
acid.
is my kind of guy.
And what sober person would be watching them, making sure they're okay.
You gotta make sure. You need a Sherpa.
Very responsible guy. So Roger Corman took acid for research.
With Jack Nicholson.
I think Nicholson was there. For sure, Dennis Hopper and Fonda were there. And I think Bruce Dern was also there.
And I think Laura Dern was also there.
She was probably swimming around somewhere. Apparently, Roger Corman, his high lasted for 6 hours, and it said that someone said, I forget who, that his face was never more than a foot off the ground. He was looking into the earth. He saw active villages in the earth, like in the dirt. He said later, it was a wonderful trip, but it was a little too overwhelming, and he understood at the end of his own trip that he could not be reproduced in a film. It did not translate. But they made the movie anyways, and it was another huge success. More importantly, in terms of film culture, these experiences Peter Fonda was getting from working with Corman were planting the seeds for the idea of a movie. We already know what I'm talking about. But before I get to that, let's wrap a lot of this up. Let's talk about what's known as the Roger Corman School of Filmmaking. So we already know about his original crew and all the people he helped in production. Let's talk about this new crew who's coming in. 1963, Corman produced a movie named Dementia 13, which I've never been able to sit through. Not very good, but it had two guys directing it.
It's Corman good.
It's got two directors doing it. Francis Ford Coppola.
Wow.
And the guy working second unit was Jack Hill. Coppola went on to...
Who's Jack Hill?
We'll get to it. Coppola, obviously, The Godfather, Apocalypse Now, legendary. Got his star working for Corman. Jack Hill had directed Bloodbath and Wasp Woman, which are two movies, not one, and pretty much made spectacular B movies for the rest of his career. He launched the Women in Cages movie, which Corman produced. Movies with, you're going to watch one with Pam Grier. He was big in blaxploitation movies. He did Coffee and Foxy Brown with Pam Grier. And then boom, Spider Baby, boom, Switchblade Sisters. Very good movie called Pit Stop. If you ever got a chance to see Pit Stop, watch Pit Stop. It's really good.
This is Hill?
Yeah, Jack Hill. Jack Hill never got the recognition he deserved until his biggest...
I don't know.
He never got the recognition he deserved until his biggest fanboy started screaming his name from the top of a pile of cocaine. That fanboy being Quentin Tarantino, director of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And literally everything else.
Oh, Turner, we did it!
We son of a cracker, we did it! In the early 70s, he gave Martin Scorsese the opportunity to direct Boxcar Bertha a full year before he directed Mean Streets, which is seen as his big breakout movie. Scorsese, of course, made a million great movies.
Literally a million, all great movies.
All great movies, not
Every
a single bad one
of them.
But
Hugo.
Scorsese also, the end is pretty good. Scorsese also helped define the style and themes of the 70s filmmaking with Taxi Driver. And of course, speaking of, Robert De Niro was in Bloody Mama, which was his second screen role ever. Ron Howard was famous since he was whistling age, but he wanted to break out of acting. He was like during the week filming Happy Days, and on weekends he started acting and directing in Corman movies. Corman gave him that big chance and put him through the rigorous Corman school, which meant here's a couple of bucks, go make a movie, you have 6 days or whatever. Ron Howard's first movie as a director was Grand Theft Auto, which was produced by Roger Corman. Ron Howard does another movie, I forgot what it's called, but it's like a bunch of cars. He's like, oh, Ron Howard, why don't you come pitch some stuff to me? So he pitches a bunch of stuff and sci-fi stories and like dramas, and Corman's like, ooh, that sounds really good, and I love that you're an actor telling me this stuff. But when you made your other movie, someone pitched a title called Grand Theft Auto. Can you come back in 2 days with a script for Grand Theft Auto? He's like, all right. Basically, like working for Corman, it was said that he teaches you how to manage your time and how to manage your resources. He's with you for the first day, and if you're good, you don't see him again for the rest of production. If you're bad, you see him every day. There's a really funny anecdote.
He doesn't like being with you.
He preferred not to. Ron Howard and Joe Dante both share this thing that Corman says, where Ron Howard has an anecdote where he's filming the Saga Speedway, which is in Saugus. Yeah, that's right. So he's filming this giant car scene with it, like Blues Brothers style car crashes, and he's only got 45 extras, and he got to fill the stadium up. And he's like, well, if I had like 100 people or even 70 people, I could make this work. So he goes to Roger, and he's like, I need more extras. And Roger says, you're not going to get any. Here's my advice. If you're really good at this, you never have to work with me again. Ron Howard's like, okay, and just made it work. Just shot at different angles.
What does he mean by that?
If you're really good at making this movie, then you don't have to ever work with me. You can move
then
forward.
You're beyond. You've graduated.
You've graduated. You never have to work with me again.
Okay.
If you have to work with me again, you've been held back from the Corman School.
We should bring up the Ron Howard connection you told me about earlier.
If you are wondering how
they got Liza Minnelli
to be in Arrested Development, which is produced by Ron Howard, it's because Liza Minnelli was his babysitter.
There's the connection between our stories.
Yeah, that's our bridge.
Ron Howard, as always.
As always, the connection between two stories.
Communities.
Yeah, you're always 2 degrees away from Ron Howard. By the time Corman's career hits like this era, the kind of late 60s, he's already got fanboys. And one of these fanboys is, of course, human gremlin, Joe Dante. Do you know who Joe Dante is?
Yeah, I know who Joe Dante is.
Okay, great. Yeah, I know who Joe Dante is.
I saw the Twilight Zone movie.
That's the other great one he did. Yeah, he does the best segment in that movie. Ted doesn't, or not, Nightmare on...
No. Joe Dante did the...
he does Nightmare on the wings, whatever distance in the air.
No, Joe Dante, he did the one where the boy...
Oh, you're right. Who did the one? Oh, are you sure?
I'm pretty sure because that one has this like Joe Dante creature.
Oh, you're right. It has like a Looney Tunes type character.
Yeah, exactly.
Who does the one in the air?
And they're watching Looney Tunes. John Lithgow. I don't know. Did Steven Spielberg do that one?
Okay.
No. He did Kick the Can. Steven Spielberg.
Oh yeah, because it's corny. Whatever. Joe Dante was a Roger Corman.
Acknowledge he's not the one that killed the guy.
We all know who that was, and that's another Corman fanboy that I don't bring up. Joe Dante, big Corman fanboy. He made good on paying Corman back in the late 70s with the cult hit Piranha. It cost $770,000 to make Piranha. It returned $10 million.
Wow.
Dante, if you don't know, went on to make The Howling, which is great, The Burbs, which is great, Gremlins, which is great, whatever segment in the Twilight Zone movie, which is...
I think we know which one it was.
Second best of that movie. He gave a chance to a young film critic to write and direct a movie as long as he used footage from Corman's other movie, The Terror, which is horrible. It's terrible. The only reason they made The Terror was because they had built a castle set and he had all the actors around, which is what Corman did. He was just like, you're still wearing this costume, we have this castle for 2 days, we're just going to film stuff and make it make sense later. So this film critic, it was a guy named Peter Bogdanovich.
Whoa.
He used the scenes of that movie inside of a movie, and that's Targets.
Wow.
Yeah, Corman he's like, if you do this, if you find a way to make these scenes work,
so
you can make Targets.
So the Boris Karloff movie in Targets was from that.
Yeah, so he had to go back and be like, Boris, you owe us 2 days. Boris Karloff.
Boris, you owe me.
That's why he's not in a lot of the movie. The movie's a lot of that Matt Damon looking guy. But like Bogdanovich made it work. Like he put himself in the movie. Targets is a great movie.
Mm-hmm. And a movie of that kind of new wave.
Exactly.
As well.
Yeah.
Peter Bogdanovich, one of the people of that
He
new
would
wave.
go on to make Paper Moon and The Last Picture Show. He gave chances to James Cameron, Jonathan Demme, John Salas.
Wait, Peter Bogdanovich or Corman?
Corman. I forgot what he used James Cameron for. It was like a little thing in the 80s.
Terminator.
Jonathan Demme went on to do Silence of the Lambs, and he gave Roger Corman a small part in the movie, which I'm always very excited to see Roger Corman in. The most culturally significant thing to come out of the Corman School, of course, is 1969's Easy Rider. Easy Rider was written by Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper and Terry Southern and directed by Hopper, produced by Fonda, starring Hopper and Fonda, along with a superb appearance by Jack Nicholson. He's so good in that movie.
He is. He's probably the best part of that movie.
Yeah, he really is. Yeah, all Corman students. Easy Rider is a story of 2 bikers traveling across the country and encountering different American scenes in various states of decay. It's a landmark movie for several reasons. It presents the counterculture in a non-exploitive way. It featured music from the counterculture. There were no clear
drugs.
There's drugs. There's no clear heroes of the movie. I mean, there are protagonists.
There's certainly a villain.
Yeah, yeah. There weren't any redemptive superheroes like in old Hollywood that required you to do that. The plot is loose. A lot of the lines were ad-libbed. It's guys just kind of traveling around taking drugs. The protagonists lose in the end, and most importantly, it was not a studio picture. It was a low-budget movie. This is the makeup for New Hollywood. Corman had been making low-budget movies for 2 decades, but nothing like this. Easy Rider, along with Bonnie and Clyde and The Graduate, which all came out of the same year, it set off New Hollywood. If you ever watched a movie from the 70s, thought, hey, how come I'm sad and I feel dirty? It was because New Hollywood set it up that way. Well, what happened was in 1968, Hayes Production...
dirty.
They're very dirty.
Yeah.
Whenever I see Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I feel like
that's
filthy.
That's a dirty movie.
But like overall, like even Bad News Bears, I kind of feel like gross.
Yeah, that's also a dirty movie. I mean,
they're all dirty. What's a clean 70s movie? Something with Doris Day?
Yeah, whatever was still lingering around.
Whatever they couldn't shake off. Well, what happened in 1968 was the Hayes Production Co. ended, and it was replaced with the MPAA rating system, GRX. And that meant you could go extreme in movies, and they'll just give you a rating for whatever movie you're, so you don't have to do this, like, all the heroes live in the end, and all the monsters die. No, you can do whatever you want with an R now, not X stuff, because that's a different kind of
theater. You need an
theater.
X for that.
Yeah. That, along with the country souring during Vietnam and civil rights blowouts in the streets and assassinations, it made the movies reflect the times more accurately. You weren't going to get spooky horror movies like The Haunting. You were going to get Night of the Living Dead and Rosemary's Baby. You were going to get...
Was that the 70s?
68. Rosemary's Baby also 68. You weren't going to get heroic westerns anymore. You were going to get The Wild Bunch. The Wild Bunch is a hard western, and it's mean, and it's ugly, and it's...
Another dirty movie.
That's another dirty movie. It was
that movie an X for sanitary reasons alone.
Hygiene.
An R in content and X in hygiene.
New Hollywood, it was a film movie heavily influenced by the French New Wave, which rejected the conventions and rules of classic cinema. Thematically and stylistically, the movies were more modern and artistic. What the movies lacked in cohesive plots, they made up for in emotions and symbolism. And just like in Corman School, low budgets for the film were a reality they dealt with, and they handled perfectly. It made the movies more inventive.
They called it the American New Wave, didn't they?
I think they did. I wanted Hollywood because Hollywood's in California, not America. Easy Rider.
Not my America.
Easy Rider was insanely insanely popular. It was the biggest grossing low-budget picture of all time in 1969. I think it grossed $60 million worldwide from a budget of like $400,000. It remains one of the greatest movies of all time. I saw it for the first time
Easy
last
Rider?
year. Yeah, Easy Rider.
It's certainly an important movie. I would not put it on my top 10 list at all.
As far as I like road movies a lot, and it's one of the better road movies. And I thought that it was going to be really lame in 60s because they always play it with Steppenwolf. And then I'm like, Jesus Christ, like my dad's movie. But it's a 70s movie. I love 70s movies. My favorite genre is 70s horror movies. They're the meanest things you've ever seen. 70s movies are really sad and they're really nasty and they don't hold back. And Easy Rider is one of the better of them. I didn't always want to like Easy Rider, but I really took to it. I don't like Peter Fonda.
I think you're a dirty hippie.
Okay, so here's the thing about Easy Rider and all of its successes. It was distributed by Columbia Pictures, not AIP, because AIP didn't trust Dennis Hopper and they were not going to fund it. They wanted the ability.
I don't blame them.
They wanted the ability to replace Dennis if he was late to the set just one day. Roger saw their logic because he was erratic and he never directed anything before, but he had worked with Hopper on the trip and he was a perfect worker on that set. And Corman explained to Dennis, like, this is a deal. You gotta be great. You gotta be really good. And Dennis was like, yeah, okay. And Peter Fonda was super upset by this clause and didn't want to put that pressure on Dennis Hopper. So they parted ways and they found the money elsewhere from the people who had made Head. So the biggest grossing low budget picture of all time at that point slipped out of the grasp of AIP because they didn't trust Corman, and Corman was pissed, livid. He, of course, didn't know that nobody knew that Easy Rider was going to be that popular or even that good, but that they didn't trust him after everything that he had did for them. That really stuck out to him. So that was it. Corman stopped working with American International Pictures, a company that he worked with since the beginning. Then he does the most Corman thing ever. He starts his own distribution company for reals this time, New World Pictures, set up at 8831 Sunset Boulevard. Throughout the 70s, he keeps doing what he's good at. He makes exploitation movies and helps fresh young talent get their foot into the door. He champions independent films in an era where mainstream studios were desperate to find the next Easy Rider. This era of Corman sees movies like Death Race 2000, Big Doll House, my first Corman movie, which was
churning out the hits.
My first Corman movie, which was Rock and Roll High School, which is the Ramones movie, Big Bad Mama, Candy Striped Nurses, Hollywood Boulevard. He helped the release of Amarcord from Fellini in the U.S. He stopped directing around this time. His last one was Bloody Mama. He said that directing was painful and producing he could do without thinking, so he just did that. Corman continued through the 80s producing slasher and fantasy movies like Slumber Party Massacre and Battle Beyond the Stars, which I think is what James Cameron worked on. He was now producing these from an old lumber yard turned studio in Venice. But drive-ins were a thing of the past in the 80s, and now it was all about video cassettes and multiplexes, so now he's working for that market, and it's not that great. And nothing hurt the exploitation movies quite like losing drive-ins and those sleazy movie theaters on 38th Street in New York or whatever people romanticize.
Porn theaters.
The porn theaters.
Say it, Greg.
I always think of them where they're theaters where there's a bunch of cats to fight the rats.
Well, there's something that is a word for a cat.
You're nasty. You're a pig.
I got an X. My first X.
He sold New World in 1983, but stayed on as consultant for some new features. The more notables being Suburbia, which is that punk movie, and Screwballs. Again, those are two separate movies. After that, he started a new company, Concord New Horizons, that kept producing these type of movies all through the decade with varying results. In 1990, he returned to directing for Frankenstein Unbound, but it was met with mixed reviews. I've seen like stills of it and it looks really bad, so I'm going to stay away from that one. It seemed like he returned to his roots with these horror movies, but nothing was really catching. His true resurgence wouldn't come until the 2000s when the Sci-Fi Channel started making monster movies and action flicks, and he was just making a bunch of them. He was
still alive?
He's
I
still
guess
alive
he was in
now.
like 8. What? He's still alive?
Yeah, Roger Corman's still alive. He was on Mark Maron's podcast like last year. Still out there, still talking. Still.
Judy didn't make it, and I guess Roger's doing fine.
All the movies that you expect to see on Sci-Fi, he was behind some of them.
Sharknado?
He had nothing to do with Sharknado, but he did produce Sharktopus and Piranaconda.
Of course he did.
Of course he did. That must have sucked that he saw Sharknado like, I've been doing that for years. He does them overseas because they're cheap and he gets better deals. Roger Corman is still doing his thing. He's making money producing low-budget horror and sci-fi movies and giving chances to people at the beginning of their career. In 2000, Corman gets his It's a Wonderful Life moment when
tries to jump off a bridge.
Pretty much, yeah. When all of the alumni from the Corman School of Filmmaking rallied together and lobbied to the Motion Picture Academy for Corman to receive an honorary Oscar. And it meant so much to him. Not that he was doing it for praise of the Academy, but to finally be accepted and not feel like Walter Paisley from Bucket of Blood anymore. Again, in 2010, the Academy of Motion Pictures of Arts and Sciences recognized his achievements and awarded Corman with the Academy Honorary Award at the inaugural Governor's Awards. I've said awards a lot. On the official website, it reads, through ingenuity, boundless energy, and a deep love of movies, Roger Corman has made more of them than just about anybody. His legendary ability to stretch a dollar allowed him to swiftly conceive and create period films and sci-fi epics on budgets that wouldn't cover the food costs on a modern studio shoot. On the website, website, on a list of his achievements, 2 stand out to me. Corman has produced more than 300 films and has directing credits on 50 titles. And the second thing they mention is he directed the acclaimed 1962 drama The Intruder, starring William Shatner, their first film to tell the story of the integration of schools in the South. So they recognize.
Yeah. Best Oscar for frugal director.
Here's something that fits into that. They also have a Hollywood joke in there on the Oscars page about Corman, that he could negotiate the production of a film on a payphone, finance it with the money left in the change slot, and then shoot the whole film in the phone booth. That's what they say about Corman.
Did he make the movie Phone Booth?
He might have actually done that.
He made Shark the Phone Booth.
At his acceptance speech, along with thanking his wife and co-worker Julie Corman, he says, "I believe the finest films being done today are done by the original, innovative filmmakers who have the courage to take a chance and gamble. So I say, keep gambling, keep taking chances." Some of his movies aren't watchable, but that's fine because his name is attached to 350 of them. Roger Corman is a lot of things. In terms of this episode's importance, I see him as the father of New Hollywood, or better yet, the mama bird puking into the mouths of the next generation. But most importantly, out of all of this, what matters the most is Roger Corman is a good guy in the film industry. He's a producer who doesn't suck.
That's so refreshing to see what Louis B. Mayer was doing to Judy Garland in the old Hollywood, and what Roger Corman, not that even a fraction of the people in the new Hollywood were good clean, people, but this guy who we're choosing to exemplify it was such a nice guy.
I keep thinking Mr. Rogers. Like, if you'd see him talk, I saved the clip on YouTube, but we didn't see it. He's just so likable. Well, okay, I understand where you're coming from.
Acid now.
Do you have the acid prepared? Some of his movies might be trash, but the man himself is the genuine article, a nice, honest man in Hollywood. He has achieved that and is deserving of respect. I really wish The Intruder had been given the chance, because who knows how different his career would have been if it had been given a chance.
Well, but maybe he wouldn't have had Easy Rider and all that stuff.
Maybe you're right, yeah.
Maybe he had to keep failing so that other people could succeed.
And if that's his career, that's sad, but that's fine because he could take it.